Hi, and welcome to Free for All Friday on Focal Point AFR Talk. I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, as always, Brian Fisher. Great to have you in the conversation. Want to get your weekend off to a roaring start, Jeff, if we can get that clip that we just talked about ready to go. Last night, San Francisco Giants playing at Arizona against the Diamondbacks, top of the eighth inning. 2 runners on base, a 5-5 game, tie game. We are in the top of the eighth inning. Angel Pagan steps into the batter's box.
And Pagan hits a high drive to right. This baby is out of here. Pagan with a 3-run home run. His first of the year.
And so my Giants go on to win 8-5. I know you're excited to hear that home run call, give you a little jolt to begin your weekend. Now, I want to call your attention to a column that I have up at rightlyconcerned.com, and it's up at our website, One News Now, and that's where I want to encourage you to go. I want to encourage you to go to our news website, One News Now, where the column is posted, and we also have a poll that is posted in conjunction with my column. We want to get your feedback on your assessment of where we are in the battle to defend marriage. So we want to get your feedback on that. Go to onenewsnow.com. This is our news site, a good solid source for news that's written from a biblical perspective, the same grid that we use here on Focal Point to evaluate what's happening in the culture. That's how the guys in our news department, that's how they evaluate what happens and develop news stories that are produced through a scriptural grid. And so the question that we ask, and I'm going to go through, just review my column with you a little bit, but I want you to go there. Please go there and respond to the poll question. Why is it critical that evangelicals continue to defend biblical marriage, even if the chances of success are bleak? Remember, I brought you this column last week where talking about Russell Moore, who is the head of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Russell Moore is the face and the voice of the Southern Baptist Convention on issues of public policy. And Russell Moore said, look, we have lost the battle for marriage. It's over. We have to resign ourselves to that eventuality. It's a certainty. We can't win this fight. It's already lost. It's gone. Same-sex marriage is inevitable in America. That was a phrase. Same-sex marriage is inevitable in America. It's going to happen. Not a thing we can do to stop it. This was from a piece that Byron York had written in the Washington Examiner based on or reporting things that Russell Moore had said meeting with journalists in a meeting that was late last week. And so Russell Moore seemed to be he was espousing the view that the battle for marriage is lost, and therefore there is no point in us fighting anymore. And so we kind of want to know what you think about this, how you feel about Russell Moore. Do you think we ought to keep fighting, and why should we keep on fighting? So again, that's One News Now. You can go to the poll. So far, we got 4 poll questions up there, and we have responses scattered all over the place among the 4 options that are given. The 4 options we give: why is it critical that evangelicals continue to defend the biblical marriage? Is it because God hasn't changed his mind on marriage? Is that why we should continue to defend it? Should we continue to defend it because we are to be salt and light in a dark world? That's the second option. Should we continue to defend biblical marriage because we are called to be faithful, not successful? That is, even if the chances of success are bleak, should we hang in there? And one reason it would be because we're called to be faithful, not successful. And then the last option, if we keep plugging away, we can win this battle. But this is Russell Moore, and this is what I need to get a question up at our Facebook page on this question. Let me see if I can enter that, and we'll get your responses to that. I haven't posted it yet, but get ready to go to the Focal Point Facebook page, and we'll get this question up for you to respond to, whether you agree with Russell Moore that there's no point in fighting the battle for marriage any longer. In fact, let me type that in right now. Do you agree with Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Convention that the fight to protect natural marriage is lost, and there is no point in defending marriage any longer. All right, so that's the question that's up at our Facebook page. Go to Focal Point, and this will maybe be the main question we want to get your feedback and kind of Facebook dialogue on. This, again, is at our Facebook page, which is Focal Point. So just go to your own Facebook page, put Focal Point in the search bar, and it'll pop right up. Do you agree with Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Convention that the fight to protect natural marriage is lost and that there is no point in defending marriage any longer? So go there and weigh in. Going to be very interested in what your take is on this. I got a call just before I came on air from the head of another major radio network who had just read the column and said, look, this conversation has got to take place. We've got to have a public conversation over this. He wasn't aware of how radical some of the things that Russell Moore had said really were until he read the column, read the quotes from Russell Moore. Again, I didn't put words in Russell Moore's mouth. I wanted to allow him to speak for himself. And he says, look, same-sex marriage is inevitable, not a thing we can do about it. We need to start preparing our churches for a new generation. That is a new generation in which same-sex marriage is normalized. Sexual deviancy governs our public policy. And in my judgment, what he's essentially saying, we as the Church of the Living God, we ought to just kind of cower in a fetal position in the corner. And Moore said this. One of the things we believe is very important, it's in the Republican Party platform, so we're not the only ones saying this, is that we ought to have a federal marriage amendment. We should seek to amend our federal Constitution to define and defend marriage in our federal Constitution as the union of one man and one woman. You know what Russell Moore says about this? He says that's ridiculous. That's a quote. It is a politically ridiculous thing to do right now. Don't even try. Then he says the illusion of a moral majority is no longer sustainable in this country. So Russell Moore has said, look, it's no longer possible that we can have any sort of a moral consensus in America. But isn't that the job of the church? The job of the church is to work and invite God to do a spiritual awakening among the people of God, bring them back to our moral center as a people, reactivate the people of God, and gather the American populace, the American population, around the abiding truths of the Judeo-Christian tradition. That is the Great Commission. And honestly, it seems to me as if Russell Moore has kind of given up on fulfilling the Great Commission in our day. We have to give up. It's an illusion to think that we could ever have a majority of the American people that are with us on the self-evident truths that the Founding Fathers believed. He says it's an illusion to think we can ever get back to the time where we will have the American people sharing the same values that the founders shared at the beginning of the Republic. This is an alarming level of pessimism, particularly when it's coming from a man who is supposed to be a leader in the task of returning our nation to its moral center. And if the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, if it's not prepared to lead in the effort to defend the institution of marriage and the family, you have to start wondering, why do the Southern Baptists even have an Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission if they're not going to be out there leading the fight, leading the effort to defend and protect the sacred institution of man-woman marriage? And so it seems like Russell Moore says, look, it's not possible for America to be a shining city on a hill again. We have to give up. That's just an illusion that America ever can be a shining city on a hill. So this strikes me as a very defeatist attitude. And you just look, just in the last 10 years, 31 different times, well, last 15 if you go back 12, 14 years, in the last decade plus, 31 times, voters have gone to the polls in 31 different states, and they have said, we want the maximum possible protection for man-woman marriage. We want to elevate protection for man-woman marriage to our state constitutions. Why in the world would you want to give up when the American people have gone to the ballot box time and time again and said, we want marriage to be protected and preserved as the union of one man and one woman. You know, and Peter Sprigg at Family Research Council did this. If you compare that to the number of Americans who've actually gone to the polls and voted for sodomy-based marriage, they actually went to the polls and said, we want sodomy-based marriage in our state. Only 4.5% of the population of America lives in states where voters themselves, I'm not talking about what legislatures have done, not talking about what judges have foisted on states through judicial tyranny, but where the people themselves have gone to the polls and said, we want sodomy-based marriage. Only 4.5% of the American people live in a state like that. You know, and Byron York, the guy that wrote this piece, says that Moore's fallback position, he says there's no other word to use it, his fallback position is to insist that once the marriage fight is lost, again, notice the defeatism there, the beliefs of Americans who oppose homosexual marriage on religious grounds be respected. Now, that's the only hope we have, that we will have some crumbs that fall from the master's table, some crumbs of religious liberty. That's all we can dare to hope for. Now, I want you to compare this to the words of Winston Churchill in the darkest days of World War II. And I mean, things were far darker politically than they are morally today for us. And here's what Winston Churchill said, and compare this to the defeatism of Russell Moore. We shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and the oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Now, I believe America needs leaders like that again. I think the church in America needs leaders like that again. I believe the Southern Baptist Convention needs a leader like that, and I think they need to ask themselves if they have one. Now, the Southern Baptists alone can answer that question, but the question must be asked, and the question must be answered. Focal Point AFR Talk, back in 2 minutes. Stay with us.